So this is our last year before Shavuos, and I figured instead of going on to the next topic of the Vilna Gaon, I will leave that after Shavuos and go a little bit off the beaten path tonight and talk about the significance and importance and history of coffee in Judaism, and specifically as regards Shavuos. Now, as you may or may not know, you probably don't, coffee was discovered in Yemen in the 1500s, 1400s rather. It was discovered by accident. A shepherd saw his goats eating eating beans off a bush, and they saw that the goats were acting a little bit strange afterwards, overexcited, overstimulated, and that's how the coffee bean was discovered, and the rest, as they say, is history. It was already used by Muslim Sufis, who are mystics, spelled S-U-F-I, Sufi, in their rituals in the early 1500s, but then it didn't become widespread in the world until much later, 1500s and the 1600s. And there is a handout which I've given you about this whole topic attached, but you don't really have to look at it unless you want to. There's more information than I'm giving you there, but I'm basically summarizing it. And in note number 2 in that handout, he quotes authors who claim that without coffee, modern civilization would be unthinkable. And someone who asserts that coffee has changed the surface of the globe. The muscular and cerebral, means with the goof, and the moyach, stimulation and transformation produced in mankind by coffee have transfigured the visage, that means the way history means the way history is seen, or how history has developed as well. And initially, coffee spread in the Arab world. It spread. If you want to follow along in the handout, you're welcome. I'm on the second page. I'm on the page 19 of that right now, and it's installed itself in the Muslim world before it got to the Jewish world. But it may well be that coffee installed itself in the Jewish world in a significant way even before it was installed in the secular world in Europe. And on page 20 of the handout, you see that there was a list of questions which coffee raised in halacha. For example, it says here, whether for note 8, may one drink it before davening? Whether coffee when taking it in a meal requires a separate bracha? Whether after drinking coffee, when obviously there's no benching, a bracha achrona is necessary, on account of being sipped in small quantities, you don't drink revius bichtei achilas pras, which is the shear for a bracha achrona. Perhaps you don't make a bracha achrona. Personally, I should say, I go by the Aruch HaShulchan. The Mishnah Berurah says not to make a bracha achrona, and he says you should rather leave a little bit at the end, and then you, which is a revius, and drink that, or to make a bracha achrona. I go by the Aruch HaShulchan, who says that it's the derech to drink coffee slowly, and therefore you can make a bracha achrona even if you drink it slowly. But it's a big machlekes at poskim. It's also an issue which is brought down in the poskim, bishul akum. Can you drink coffee brewed by a non-Jew? Most poskim, the overwhelming majority of poskim, say that you can because it was water and it remains water. And the evidence is that we make a charcoal on it. We don't make a boy priya eitz, even though coffee comes from coffee beans. So therefore, most poskim, except for those who follow the Arizal, so say that one may drink coffee even if it was made by a non-Jew. Now, but the point of our conversation tonight is not those other halachas, but rather how it affected the avodas Hashem of people who use it. And I'm going on now to page 22 in the handout, where the author quotes the Rabaz. Rabaz is one of the early achronim in Egypt, and he is an extremely, extremely important a source of halacha. And he says you can't drink coffee in a coffee house. Now, we don't really have this concept anymore. Starbucks is not a coffee house, it's a cafe. In Detroit, there is a coffee house which only serves coffee, not even milk or sugar to put, maybe there's sugar, but not, I don't think so. not even milk or sugar to put into your coffee. As a matter of fact, it's owned by Jews, and it's, of course, kosher Pesach. The entire year it's kosher Pesach, because nothing is served there besides coffee itself. So a coffee house was a place where coffee was consumed with great devotion and dedication, and it was miyuchat primarily to coffee. Now you can imagine, the first people had coffee, and then this new stimulus had tremendous impact, and therefore it affected their behavior. And therefore the Rabbans looked at it almost as an intoxicating beverage, as if it's alcohol. Therefore, nonetheless, they did not consent to be being drunk at a meeting place, a masiba of non-Jews, just like it's also to drink alcohol, a masiba of non-Jews. For this has some undesirable consequences, and the Jews are holy, and especially since the beverage has no pleasing taste or odor, nor appearance. If it's needed for medicinal purposes, one may send for it and have it delivered home. This is done by their leading figures, even the Muslims, who would be embarrassed to drink it at such establishments. So again, the coffee house atmosphere, the rabbis rejected. The coffee itself, which he viewed as medicinal because, after all, coffee is an acquired taste. The way I acquired a taste for coffee is when I was living in Israel. When I was in 7th and 8th grade, I was in a yeshiva where they decided it was too expensive to serve us milk in the morning, so they served us coffee with a significant amount of milk and sugar or sweetener. I don't know which one it was, and that was the drink of choice in the yeshiva. So I got used to drinking coffee. So but the coffee itself was considered to be something medicinal, which would help be matir drinking it before davening, because if it has a medicinal use, it's not so much food. So then, of course, it'd be permitted to drink it before davening as something which is helps a person function during the course of the day. And if you take a look at page 23, it's brought down there from the Pri Chodesh, it's again one of the Chosh V'Achronim, that one cannot attain presence of mind without the aid of coffee. So therefore, there was, if you take a look at the footnote here, and you don't have to look, I'm just going to quote it, that another Rav said, it was an everyday practice at sizable meals after drinking a glass of wine at the conclusion of the Birchas Hamazon, grace. Another beverage called coffee would be brought in order to restore one's presence of mind, which obviously they had very strong wine. So coffee was a new and powerful influence. Now, around the same time, in the mid-1500s, on page 24, about 1536, Rabbi Yosef Karo and his brother-in-law, Shlomo Alkabetz, the author of the Chadodi, introduced the idea of staying up all night on Shavuos and learning. And there's no discussion specifically in Shulchan Aruch about drinking coffee, nor is there a discussion, I think, if I recall correctly, in the Shulchan Aruch itself about staying up all night on Shavuos. It's discussed later on. But there is, later on, he brings down in this article that in 1580 already there was a coffee house in Sfas. And perhaps this coffee house was significant in being able to help the people, the holy people in Sfas, and there were tremendous Kedoshim in Sfas, be able to do something which had not been so widespread in Judaism until then, which is Tikkun Chatzos. Until the mid-1500s, Tikkun Chatzos, which is a tefillah to be said on the Churban Beis HaMikdash, and the anticipation of Mashiach, it's in two parts, Tikkun Leah and Tikkun Rachel. I personally have never said it in my life, but it's in many Sidurim. Was very rarely said because most people couldn't stay up or get up at midnight. It was a very difficult thing. Very few people did it. David HaMelech got said to have gotten up at midnight. That was tremendous praise that he was able to get up at midnight and then be involved in his avodas Hashem. So Tikkun Chatzos was very, very rare, and as a result, there was a competing ritual, which was called he brings it down here on page. page 32, a rite of Shomrim Laboker, which is much easier because until not staying up until midnight, but rather, or getting up at midnight, but it was something which was done early in the morning when one rose. And people used to get up early in the morning, just used to go to bed much earlier because there was no electric light. Electric light, by the way, after coffee is probably the thing which influenced patterns of behavior to at night to the greatest extent possible. I just wanted to share with you what it says here in the footnote in page 28, that a person who traveled in the East in 1650 sampled coffee and found it beneficial primarily for ailments of the stomach and for vigilance, to be able to be more aware, alert, sorry. And writing with Turkey, early in the century, the English traveler George Sandys had commented similarly on the popular drink black as soot, that's ashes, and tasting not much unlike it, which helpeth, as they say, digestion, and procureth alacrity, makes people function more quickly and more alertly. So the coffee was important in order to make tikkun chatzos more prevalent, and it's brought down here on page 28 that he said throughout the Reb Moshe Zakuto was a very chashuv place in the 1600s, said throughout all the land of Israel and the kingdom of the Turks, it is customary to drink coffee every night after midnight, for similar to medicine that it drives sleep away, sleep as is known, and that this coffee was something which allowed people to get up around midnight to be able to do tikkun chatzos, and therefore, as he goes on to describe, the things shifted. Used to be they did this Shomim Laboker, and there are many pamphlets from the 1600s which were printed in Italy specifically about this ritual called Shomim Laboker. But afterwards, starting in the 1700s, we see many more pamphlets published and much more widespread about tikkun chatzos. What changed? Changes the availability of coffee. Since coffee became more available, so therefore people were able to switch from Shomim Laboker, which is kind of like a b'diavad, because Chatzos Laila, the midnight is considered to be a time of great holiness. They're able to switch to the Lechatchila, which is to study in the middle of the night to say Tikkun Chatzos, and then sometimes learn throughout the night, which is another thing which many Mekubalim did. Now, this was more difficult in Italy than it was in Sfas to do, and that's why coffee was more important there than in Sfas, because Italy, as you see on page 33, is much further north than Sfas. And therefore, in the summer, the nights are 2 hours shorter in Italy, because the higher you go in latitude, the shorter the nights in the summer, and vice versa in the winter, the longer the nights, then lower down in latitude. So therefore, they had very little, they could get less sleep. And therefore, this Tikkun Chatzos really needed this coffee in order to spread, and it was spread especially significantly in the area of Venice, where many of the Sfarim were printed. And if you go on again, you don't follow inside, but if you do, so then at this time, on page 36, you'll see there was introduced more widely the idea of staying up the entire night of Shavuos and the entire night of Hoshana Rabbah. Now, these are very important, that Shavuos and Hoshana Rabbah are days in which you can make coffee, because it's Yontif, not Shabbos. So therefore, it was much easier, before they had instant coffee, to stay awake on those nights. And he proves, the author of this article, that even those who stay up Shavuos before coffee hit Europe did not stay up all night. They did have to go to sleep at some point. But once coffee hit Shavuos, coffee hit Europe, they were able to to stay up the entire night. And there is now, it's not clear when it started, but there's now on page 37, there's a Messiah that certain people have, that anyone who avoided sleep the entire night of Shavuos, will be assured of surviving the entire year. Now, it's interesting that he brings out an interesting point, which is the question is what makes you give that survival? Is it the coffee? I'm not the coffee. It's obviously the coffee, but is it the not sleeping, or the learning all night? Because it could be the Mesiras Nefesh of not sleeping is equally important to the learning Torah throughout the night. So the idea of staying up all night grew in direct correlation and spread in direct correlation to the idea of staying up all night, or learning, or tikkun chatzos. It's interesting that it's brought down here that in first he brings down how the tikkun chatzos became more published, and the other one, showing the book, became less published, and then on page 42, it was not only Italy that the growing popularity of coffee in the 18th century exerted an appreciable impact upon the Jewish ritual and confraternal life, means life among people who are members of groups. Even further north in Worms, the statutes of the Gemilas Chasodim with Chesed Society reveal a striking change in the status of the beverage during that century, as well as clear evidence in its use in nocturnal rituals. In 1731, the confraternity decided that its annual banquet, no beverage other than wine or brandy should be served at its expense. Tea or coffee was added, perhaps half seriously, would be considered as taboo, as it was the wine of Gentiles. The members could drink beer and sour water, provided they brought their own. By 1763, however, the taboo was broken, and coffee joined wine and brandy among the official drinks that the confraternity served at its banquets. In the same year, moreover, the Gemilas Chasodim of Worms decided to provide coffee on 2 other occasions. The study vigils held on the nights of Shavuos and Hoshana Rabbah. The member in whose home the vigil would be held was required to provide wine at his own expense, but the coffee would be paid for by the confraternity. Obviously, it was considered to be so important that it had to be paid for by the community. And in one of the footnotes here, I want to finish because it's over time. One of the footnotes, he points out that some people had the minhag to drink coffee in the middle of the tikkun chatzos, because the first part of tikkun chatzos is about the churban and kinos, and the second part of the tikkun chatzos is about the Mashiach, and therefore the coffee wakes you up to have more fervor, more simcha, more perhaps excitement about the coming of Mashiach. And we should all be zeicha, whether we stay up Shavuos night, whether we drink coffee, whether it excites us or not, to certainly be excited about the coming of Mashiach. Amen.